favorite dragon color or type. There's a long screed that I can go on over this. So, the first thing I'll do is I'll complain about the green dragon, the new one. All the way back in first edition and through all the editions up until 4th, the chromatic dragons had, well, actually, and the metallic dragons too, they had very unique silhouettes. You could tell which dragon you were looking at just by the outline. And then 4th edition kept that, but they screwed it up. So it was always, the chromatics are the easiest ones. They're the ones that you encounter as villains the most. They show up in a lot more artwork. And it was always this. So the chromatic dragons are the white dragon, the black dragon, the green dragon, the blue dragon, and the red dragon. And I believe they're that powerful in that order. The only ones I mess up sometimes are green and blue. The white dragon has a bit of a beak to it. And that was the unique thing about its head, is it had this beak-like mouth. The black dragon has forward curving horns. The green dragon had a fin on its head. The blue dragon has what looks like a rhinoceros horn kind of coming up from its snout. And the red dragon has backward curving horns. And they all have the overall in body shape, they all were very iconic dragon, which, I mean, it's a little bit weird saying that they were like iconic dragon, in that D&D was one of the sources that kind of helped iconicize that form for the dragon. But your standard Western dragon looking creature with four legs, hind legs, 2 wings, serpentine neck and tail, some spikes and fins and stuff going on, but yeah, they had that form. Then in 4th edition, for no good reason at all, they said, hey, you know that green dragon, all it's got is the fin? We don't like that. Instead, we're going to give it a stupid horn on its nose. But the blue dragon has a horn. Well, yeah, that's my argument. So the blue dragon has a horn, but it's kind of like a rhino. It's not really like a big rhino horn, but it's kind of like a rhino horn. It's a shorter, blunter, bony growth up from the snout. The green dragon, they decided, can have a longer, pointier horn straight out from the snout, like someone stuck a party hat on its face. It looks stupid, and there was no reason to do that. And actually, now that I look back, I was even trying to look for a picture, because I couldn't quite remember if it was Paizo or Wizards of the Coast that made the change to the green dragon, and it was Wizards of the Coast. Finally found a picture with the stat block next to it, so I'm like, oh, that's 4th edition. And I was pretty sure it was 4th edition that screwed it up. You already have a dragon that has a horn on its nose. So, sure, you pointed the horn in a different direction. And yes, sure, you can still recognize which dragon is which, but why duplicate the horn? And why, when you add the horn, make it look so stupid? There's no good reason for it. Okay, so let's get into the dragons again. Back in 1st edition in the Monster Manual, there were 2 types of dragons. There were chromatic dragons, the evil dragons, the white, black, green, blue, red, that we already mentioned. And there were the good dragons, the metallic dragons. And they were brass, copper, silver, bronze, copper, silver, and gold. And life was wonderful. And then 2nd edition went ahead and introduced extras. Now, some of these dragons were probably introduced maybe in 1st edition. Well, I know that these dragons were introduced in 1st edition, but they weren't in the Monster Manual, and I didn't have other books to look at growing up to know. So for me, these were 2nd edition uniques. And they introduced the gem dragons. They said, well, we have evil dragons, and we have good dragons, but we need neutral dragons, and those are the gem dragons. And that's amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz. And gem dragons are described as being smaller than the other dragons, but they're also smarter. They had psionic powers. They had weird breath weapons. They had crazier designs as far as I was concerned. They try to make them actually look crystalline in a way. Some of them are a little bit blockier. But I wasn't a big fan of the crystal dragons. I think the ones that I liked the most, as just based on their breath weapon, Topaz had a cone of dehydration, so he would just breathe on you, and then suddenly you would be dehydrated. And then the Amethyst dragon would spit up. What was stupid is it said its breath weapon is a purple lozenge. Well, that's not a breath weapon. That's a lozenge. It's not breathing a breath weapon. It's spitting up a purple lozenge. But yeah, it would spit up this little purple crystal thing, and where it landed, it would explode. They changed that in 3rd edition to a Force Blast breath weapon, which is a little bit cooler. I tried to look up. There is a dragon somewhere, and I want to say it's in a 3rd edition monster manual. Not the 3rd edition. It's in a 3rd edition book. Maybe it's in one of the Forgotten Realms books. But there is a dragon that has a cube of force as a breath weapon. You know, maybe it is the Amethyst. Maybe instead of being a cone, it breathes out a cube of force damage. Maybe that's where it's coming from. Because I always remember the Amethyst for being the force breath weapon. So on top of that, 2nd edition also introduced this thing where they said the metallic dragons and the gem dragons and the chromatic dragons are like the true dragons. And then you have these other dragons, but they look like they belong to these groups, but they don't really. For example, there's the steel dragon, and you would think the steel dragon would be a metallic dragon, but it's not, because all metallic dragons have 2 breath weapons, and a steel dragon only has 1 breath weapon. So it's like a pseudo-metallic dragon. Likewise, there's the brown dragon, and you would think the brown dragon's a chromatic, but it doesn't have wings, and all true chromatic dragons have wings. So it can't be a chromatic dragon. So it's a pseudo-chromatic dragon. And I actually thought it was kind of cool in that you would have these dragons that are dragons, but they're not really true dragons. They're like these mutant offspring dragon, set aside kind of dragons. And they always had some slight variation from the original. For whatever reason, back in 1st edition, chromatic dragons all had their iconic breath weapons. White breathed cold, black breathed acid, green breathed chlorine gas. It was specifically chlorine gas. Blue breathed lightning, and red breathed fire. And the only real change that happened between them, as far as other than the stupid green dragon redesign, is green then breathed a cloud of acid instead of a cloud of chlorine gas, like poison. The chromatics, I honestly do not remember all of their breath weapons. I can tell you that the silver dragon had a cloud of paralyzation gas on top of its ice breath weapon. The copper dragon, I think copper was fire and slow. Gold was fire and... Gold, back in the original D&D, back in 1st edition and 2nd edition, breathed chlorine gas as well. So it had the same breath weapon as a green dragon, as well as having the same breath weapon as a red dragon. And they want you to believe that they're good guys. I'm trying to think. Now, other dragons, creatures that are dragons or are very related to dragons. You have the pseudo-dragon, which is a cute little dragon creature size of a cat, has a poison stinger on its tail that puts you to sleep. I've had a number of characters that have taken pseudo dragons as companions or familiars because they're cute and they're cool. There's the fairy dragon, which I haven't paid much attention to, but they exist. They have butterfly wings and they have a kind of hallucination breath weapon. There's a cloud of hallucinatory gas. There is the dragon turtle, which is just a big turtle that's also a dragon. There is the dragon, which is a dragon lion with wings kind of thing. Cervantes Ordóñez actually took the leadership feat in 3rd edition to gain a dragon as a mount, which is his first flying mount. There are sea lions, which are kind of no, those aren't the dragon ones. I want to say there was another sea creature that was part dragon, but I don't recall it offhand. But of all of the dragons, my favorite dragon is the Shadow Dragon. This has existed since second edition, and like I said, it's probably was created in first edition, but I didn't have access to that. But mostly because the Shadow Dragon breathes out a cloud of gas that drains levels. So it literally breathes out a cloud of gas that sucks the life out of you. And when I read that in the second edition monster manual, that's when I created, well, soon after that is when I created Akanai Jean, the Demon Dragon of Dusk. He's a Shadow Dragon, and he deals negative levels as his breath weapon. But of the regular dragons, the true dragons, my favorite dragon is the Black Dragon. He has had a slight change in art direction over the years, because it used to just be the way that you'd recognize a black dragon was those forward curving black horns on his head. And as they've progressed, the artwork has made black dragons seem more skeletal, more emaciated, and I think it works really well because they live in the swamps, they're hiding under the water, then they come up, their face looks more skeletal, and you can see like their teeth are more prominent, like as though they had lips that have melted away. And I really like black dragons a lot. Plus, they're lower level. You can get lower. They're the lower end of the power spectrum for chromatic dragons. The only one that's weaker is a white dragon. So you can bring them into play earlier. And they breathe acid, and most parties don't protect themselves against acid normally. And one of my most memorable encounters with a black dragon, as the DM, I was running the Red Hand of Doom, and the party was fighting against this black dragon. And I might have shared this story before, but the party got real lucky in the first couple rounds of combat, and a couple critical hits, and they literally killed the dragon in like the first 2 or 3 rounds of combat when they fought against it. They were able to shoot it with like bows and lightning while it was flying, and then it landed to attack one of the guys, and he critted and messed it up, and it dropped dead. But I didn't let it drop dead. I decided, you know what, this is a dragon, and if it just died right now, that's not going to be good. It's not exciting. It's not iconic. The party's going to be, they're going to start getting in their heads that dragons aren't really that tough, so that's not a good idea. So we're going to just keep it alive and let it serve its narrative purpose. And so I kept that combat going for quite some time, and this dragon ended up pretty much messing everybody up. Started dealing damage left and right. I wasn't even looking at its stat block anymore. I would roll the die, and if I felt it was high enough, it got to deal damage. And he took this was the final fight of this game too. Not the game, but like this session. The party had cleared out this whole dungeon, so the dragon was the only thing left. So it's not like they were going to get messed up and then have to fight something else as well. So I said, you know what, we're going to use up all their resources. They're not going to end this fight with any hit points and any magic spells left over. So the dragon messed them all up, knocked them all down, grappled the barbarian, and because the dragon can breathe underwater, dragged the barbarian underwater and kept it grappled, and the barbarian was getting very close. Well, I don't want to say very close. He had a very good constitution, but he was getting along the way. He was halfway or more towards drowning by the time he finally broke free. The druid had summoned an octopus to come help, and they managed to break free of the dragon, climb out of the water, and then when the dragon came up again, the barbarian killed it. But it was a very fun and iconic fight. I asked the players how they felt about fighting a dragon. They were scared of dragons. They felt that they could take them on, but that they needed to be very prepared. And they really thought that was an exciting fight, and they loved it. And then I didn't tell them then, but later on, towards the end of the campaign, I let them know that starting with that fight, when you guys are up against those kinds of iconic fights, I just ignored the stat block and made it fun and exciting. And they enjoyed it. And that's what's fun when you can trust a DM. But I love black dragons, and that's one of my favorite black dragon stories. So, until next time, bye-bye.